I just kind of want to do a couple maneuvers to see what it can do before I put it down.
A wild scene unfolding thousands of feet above Puget Sound.
I wouldn't know how to land it. I wasn't really planning on landing it.
A Horizon Air employee steals a plane from SeaTac.
You know, I thought, my God, I got to get ready to run. If he doesn't know what he's doing, he's gonna kill somebody.
All of this coming to an end in a fiery crash on a remote island in Pierce County. And good afternoon to you. I'm Michelle Esteban. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are learning more about the Horizon Airlines employee who stole this plane from SeaTac Airport, took it in flight for more than an hour, then crashed on Ketron Island. Sources confirmed to ABC News that employee is 29-year-old Richard Russell of Pierce County. The company confirms he was a ground service agent for Horizon Air, with them for more than 3 years. We know he was the only person on board, and he was credentialed to be in that secured area where he found that plane. The plane he was flying was caught on video doing giant loops and stunts around the South Sound before it crashed, and we know air traffic controllers were talking with him the whole time, trying to keep him away from populated areas and getting him to land. We have team coverage for you tonight, covering all angles of the story. We want to begin tonight with co-host Gabe Cullen with the very latest on this investigation. Gabe.
Now, Michelle, the FBI is now leading that investigation with help from the NTSB and several other agencies. Investigators took a ferry out to Ketron Island this morning. The goal, to map the wreckage and to find two devices. One is a flight data recorder, the other a cockpit recorder. They'll also start interviewing that Horizon Air employee's friends, family, and coworkers to try to figure out why he did this.
What the hell?
It was a stunning scene above the Puget Sound. A Horizon Air employee flying a stolen plane from SeaTac as air traffic control tried to talk him down.
Congratulations, you did that. Now let's try to land that airplane safely and not hurt anybody on the ground.
All right. Damn it. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't want to. I was kind of hoping that was going to be it, you know?
Fighter jets closely followed as he flew circles and did tricks for more than an hour.
No, I'm not taking you to any jets. I'm actually keeping you away from aircraft that are trying to land at SeaTac.
Oh, okay, yeah, I don't want to screw with that.
I honestly thought it was an air show practice maybe, or a military exercise.
John Waldron shot this unbelievable video as he watched the flight unfold.
And then he came straight at me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to get out of here, because if he doesn't stop, this is not going to be good.
At 8:47 p.m., the 29-year-old crashed in a field on Ketron Island and died. No one else was hurt.
Very unusual. It's not like we get this every day.
Now the FBI and NTSB are investigating. They took a ferry to the crash site this morning looking for flight data and the cockpit recorder.
He might have been talking to himself in the cockpit.
One thing investigators don't know is how that ground service agent managed these maneuvers in a Q400 airplane.
To our knowledge, he didn't have a pilot's license. To be honest with you, I mean, commercial aircraft are complex machines, so I don't know how he achieved the experience that he did.
The dramatic flight many are still processing as an investigation gets underway.
Knowing what I know now, it's extremely heart-wrenching and sad, knowing that I recorded the last moments of somebody's life.
Also complicating this investigation this evening is a 2-acre fire that's burning on Ketron Island caused by that crash. DNR tells me they do have crews on scene and they don't expect it to spread, but it will take time to mop it up. Michelle?
Very complicated. All right, Gabe, thanks much. Well, we learned new today that Russell does not have a pilot's license. The question we're all wondering, including investigators, of course, is just how he was able to not only steal the plane, but fly it. Co-host Patrick Quinn joins us now live from SeaTac Airport. And Patrick, airline officials say the man was credentialed to access this plane, and he was on duty yesterday.
Michelle, that's right. Let's point that out very early on. This ground service agent who'd worked for Horizon Air for 3.5 years, he had clearance to access the plane. What's unclear is how he was able to turn the plane around, turn the plane on, and take off without anyone stopping him. You've seen the cell phone video, the harrowing dips and surges in the Puget Sound sky, but how was the plane ever able to get off the ground in the first place? That's the question Alaska Air, Horizon, Port of Seattle, and FBI officials are digging into today.
Normally there are ramp clearances, there are ground clearances, there are takeoff clearances. Those did not happen in this situation. This was an unauthorized flight.
Brad Tilden, CEO of the Alaska Air Group, the parent company of Horizon, said the current industry-wide methodology is to secure the employee rather than to lock or secure the airplane.
We'll look at whether improvements can be made going forward, but that is the setup that we have today.
According to Alaska Airlines, that employee, who according to ABC is 29-year-old Richard Russell, was allowed, even supposed to be at this maintenance lot. He completed at least 2 background checks prior to being hired and was likely in uniform when he single-handedly turned the plane around.
The individual did use a pushback tractor to rotate the aircraft 180 degrees, so he could then taxi the aircraft out onto the active surfaces.
A process aviation analyst John Nance told me could have taken as little as 5 minutes and wouldn't necessarily turn any heads.
No one would question that, really, unless it was his immediate supervisors who happened to pass by and wondered why they were moving the plane. But in most cases, everybody knows their assignment. That would not have been unusual. And then to get in, disconnect the tug, start the airplane, that's really where the questions began.
Russell appears to have had secret flight experience, but Nance said the biggest question this incident raises is, did he have any bigger secrets? And could the industry do a better job of recognizing issues in their employees before they impact others?
Did anybody see any indication that maybe they didn't report or they didn't think enough about that this fellow was coming apart at the seams?
And I mentioned those background checks. Every Horizon Air employee goes through a 10-year check prior to being hired. They're then rechecked every 2 years. However, according to an Alaska Airlines spokesperson, mental health checkups are not part of that 2-year reassessment. Michelle?
All right, Patrick, thanks very much. Good information there. During a news conference earlier today, the CEO of Horizon Air and the CEO of their parent company, Alaska Air Group, insisted they will get to the bottom of the security breach, underscoring that safety is their #1 priority. Of course, we learned some additional details today from that news. You heard just some of them there. And to help put them in perspective, we now turn to ABC aviation analyst John Nance, who was also included in Patrick's story. John, thanks for being with us. You know, one interesting note that both you and Patrick talked about was the fact that this guy was able to use a pushback tractor to turn that aircraft 180 degrees so he could taxi it onto the active surfaces. Starting that aircraft up, it seems to me that there would be cameras in place. Wouldn't some sort of red flags go off before this guy could take off?
Not really. There's an awful lot of activity going on, even in the north cargo ramp where this airplane was. And to see somebody hook up a tug who looks like he knows what he's doing to move the airplane around would probably not be worthy of comment by anybody but his direct supervisor or someone who knew that that's not what should happen. Where there's a point of departure, though, is when the guy on the tug then gets out and starts the airplane, because now the assumption would be, wait a minute, the guy could have just taken the airplane wherever he needed to go. Why is he starting it up? The assumption would be he'd be a mechanic at that point. That's about the first point at which somebody watching intently might say, okay, something's going on here. I don't think that happened in this case, though.
We're looking right now, John, we're looking right now at some aerial shots from today from Air 4 looking down here at the debris field. Have you had a chance to see some of that? Is there any telltale signs that you've seen or anything that you've learned from your sources?
Not about the final denouement when he hit the island. I understand that there are enough pieces of the airplane that he probably didn't come down completely vertically, but of course it begs the question of whether or not this was his final intention or whether or not he ran out of fuel. Certainly he was demonstrating an incredible capability for flying an airplane when he didn't have a pilot's license and apparently no pilot training. But I think he just lucked out on a couple of those maneuvers where it looked like he was going to hit the water, and somehow he managed not to.
Yeah, he was nosediving right from Puget Sound last night. That was probably around 8:30, or 8:40, right in there, shortly before it crashed. What are some of the multiple layers of clearance? Because it isn't just get in the plane and take off. Would any of those been checks and balances here?
Well, in this particular case, since he wasn't at the terminal, he wouldn't have been talking to the company tower, so to speak. He would have, if he was doing it properly, if it were an authorized flight and this was a pilot, he would have talked to ground control before he taxied out onto the active runway. But apparently, just looking at the transcript of the exchange between the ground controller and attempting to call him, asking who is that Dash 8 on runway 16 center, there was no answer from that. So there was only a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes from the time the controller first became suspicious to the time the airplane was rolling down the runway, with, by the way, apparent smoke from both tires, which would indicate he probably did not take the parking brake off.
All right. Well, the CEO of Alaska Air said that it's too soon to know what security changes could come of this. But he did underscore something that was interesting. He said that aviation in America, the doors on the planes aren't like in a car. There's not a key here. They secure the airfield. Can you just weigh in on that?
Yes, that's always been our philosophy in commercial aviation, and it's worked. It's worked very well. And that is, we secure the perimeter. We don't let anybody come over the fence. We make sure that the only people that are on the air side of the operation and near the airplanes are people who have been vetted and are properly credentialed. And the assumption has always been, and it's been a good one, at least up until now, and I think it will continue to be, that if we pay attention to the people, just as Brad said, and we secure the perimeter, that's what's going to be necessary. You don't expect your own people to do this. But then again, we're dealing with human beings, and we are not perfect as humans, and we do have breakdowns.
John Nance, well said. We appreciate your time as always. Thanks again for joining us last night and tonight. We'll talk to you again in our 6 o'clock hour.
Thank you.
Again, ABC sources identifying the rogue pilot as Richard Russell from Sumner, Washington. Thank you, John. Today, we are working to learn more about him. KOMO's Mitch Pittman has been working that all day long. He joins us with what he has learned now. Mitch.
Yeah, Michelle, as far as we know, this took everyone by surprise. His wife and family who are in the area are not talking yet, but here's what we've pieced together so far. Richard Russell, or Bebo as he often referred to himself online, had been working at Horizon for 3.5 years. At first, it was thought he was a mechanic last night, but in fact, he was a ground service agent, the folks who load bags, prep the plane, and tow it, which was his job. Alaska Airlines says he had clearance, passed all the standard background checks Patrick told you about, and had just worked his shift yesterday. Now, I spoke this morning with one of his former co-workers. Michael West was at Horizon until last year, and there was never any indication or talk of him wanting to do this.
He was your normal guy. He was quiet. He liked to read books. He always had a smile on his face. He'd joke around. And I can't really think of anything bad to say about him. He was just an all-around great guy.
Now, West did say that in that role on the tow team, he had access to the cockpit, training on the radio and the switches with auxiliary power, and of course, the ability to move the airplane. Now, Horizon Air did say that there is an emergency hotline for employees 24/7 for mental health access, but right now they're not saying if there were any red flags in that area before last night. Michelle?
Certainly a question of whether or not he was fit for duty. All right, thanks kindly. Appreciate that, Mitch. We are going to keep following this story throughout the weekend for you. We will have live reports right here on